second thing that we want to discuss is how to convert a number if it is represented as a string into integer or double as an example. You know that when you read from the keyboard, we use the next methods of the scanner class. If you want to read an integer, you use next int. If you want to read double, you read next double. You know that these methods, when they read the input from the keyboard, they read the input as a string. And internally, they convert the strings into a number. So now, if you read the number from a file, and this file is a text file, so you are reading the number as a text, as a string. So how to convert this number into an integer, for example, or into a double? To know how to convert any string to a numeric data type, then we need to understand the wrapper classes that are available in Java for each primitive data type. Java provides 8 primitive data types. They are called primitive data types because they are not created from classes. They are part of the Java language. So when we use them in our programs, all are used with lowercase letters. Aligned with these 8 primitive data types, Java also provides wrapper classes for all of the primitive data types. We have already explained the meaning of a wrapper class for an array. It was a class that we have defined an array inside it as a data member, and also we provided the necessary methods to facilitate the use of that array. Now, if we have a wrapper class for a primitive data type, then it is a class that is wrapped around the primitive data type. Not only it holds the value of the primitive data type, it also has the necessary methods that are related to this primitive data types. This table shows all wrapper classes for all primitive data types. Notice that all wrapper classes have the same name as their corresponding primitive data types, with the first letter in uppercase. Except the int and char data types, they have different names. For int, the wrapper class is integer, I in uppercase, and for char, the wrapper class is character, C in uppercase. To create an object from the wrapper class, you simply pass the value of the primitive data type to the constructor. And here is an example on how to create an object from the integer data type. So the wrapper class integer, the variable name, and here you are creating the object by supplying the primitive data type 7 to the constructor. After you create the object, then you can use the object exactly the same way as using the primitive data type. You simply can assign a value, for example, number equal to 7. You can add a value to number. You can increment number by saying a plus, and so on. The same operations that you do on the primitive data type, you can apply them on the object of the primitive data type. After understanding that we have a wrapper class for each primitive data type, let us show you how to use the numeric wrapper classes like integer and double for converting numbers that are represented as strings. To convert numbers that are in strings using numeric data type wrappers, we use methods that are called parse methods. Each of the numeric wrapper classes has a static method that converts a string to a number. For example, the integer class has a method that converts a string to an int value. The double class has a method that converts a string to a double, and so on for the rest of the numeric data types. These methods are known as parse methods because their names begin with the word parse. But to use them, if things goes wrong, then an error will be issued as an exception. So these parse methods all throw a number format exception if the string object does not represent a numeric value. As an example, if you try to convert an integer using the parse method for the integer wrapper class, and you pass a string to the method that is not an integer string, then the parse method will throw a number format exception as an error. In this example, we have listed all parse methods that we could use to convert a number string into a number. You simply write the name of the wrapper class for this number, then you call the parse method and you supply the number string as an input parameter. The parse method, on the other hand, will retain the value as a binary value and will be saved into the corresponding variable as a primitive data type. For example, if you want to convert a number string into a byte, Then you write the name of the wrapper class for byte, byte B in capital letter, followed by calling the parse method that will convert the number string into a byte. The return value will be saved into a byte variable as a primitive data type. For integer, we do the same, but the name of the method is parse int, and for short, the name of the method is parse short. For long, the name of the method is parse long. For float, the name of the method is parse float. And finally, for double, the name of the method is parse double. All of them accept a number string as an input parameter and converts the number into the corresponding primitive data type. Let us go to JGrasp and have a little demonstration on how to use one of these parse methods for converting a number string into a number. To show you how to use the parse methods for converting numbers from strings, we are going to write a very simple program that simply asks the user to enter an integer. We read the integer and we display it on the screen. First, we are going to read this integer using the nextInt method. Then we will show you how to read this integer using a parseInt method that is inside the wrapper class integer. So let us now read this integer using nextInt. We display a message system.out.print, and here we say enter an integer, and we are going to read this integer and save it into a local variable called number by calling the method nextInt. And finally, we display on the output screen the number by the message you have typed, and we display the number. Let us run the program and explain to you how nextInt works. When nextInt waits for the user to type an integer, anything you type is in fact a line of text. So nextInt is going to read the number 789 as a string. All these numbers are represented in ASCII code inside the string. After it reads the number as a string, internally it converts it into an integer. This integer will be retained as a primitive data type, and we save it inside number. So now when we press enter, as you can see, it reads it as a line of text, converts it into an integer, and then return it back to us so we can save it inside a local variable. Now what we are going to do, we are going to read the integer as a string. We are going to call the method parseInt that is inside the integer wrapper class to convert the number into an integer, and then we will display it on the screen. So let us do that. I'm going to copy these 3 lines and I'm going to save them here, and we will change the message, and here we are going to say using integer dot parseInt method. And first we are going to read from the user the number as a string, as a single word, and we are going to save it into a string variable, and I'm going to call it line. After we read the number as a string, we are going to call the method parseInt, and we will pass it as an input parameter, and this method is defined inside the wrapper class integer. The return value from the parse integer is a primitive data type of type int. We are going to save it into a variable called number that we have defined earlier. After that, we are going to print it on the output screen. So let us run the program. So now it is asking for an integer. This is by nextInt, so we're going to type 456. Now here it is asking for entering an input as an integer. Now when we type the number 790, we are going to read this number as a single word using next, and we are going to save it into line. Then this line, which is the string for the number, is given as an input parameter to the parseInt. Then parseInt is going to convert it and retain it as a primitive data type and saved into number. So let us press enter. As you can see, that has converted the number correctly as a primitive data type. And finally, similar to nextInt, if the input parameter to the parseInt does not really represent an integer, then parseInt will raise an exception. Let me show you that. So now let us run the program. Now this is for nextInt. Let us give it an integer. Now here, instead of writing an integer as a string, I'm going to write it with dot. Now when you press enter, notice that it has raised an exception called number format exception. Therefore, if you want to use it for converting a string into a number, then you need to use it with try and catch block. And this will make your program not to crash if the conversion is not successful.